From a poor country with modest growth to a rising economic force around the world, forecasters have argued over not whether, but when, China will surpass the US as the greatest economy in the world for a number of years now. However, there are numerous red flags, such as rising income inequality, declining house prices, and a lack of jobs for graduate students. And it is almost evident that the government will miss its target of 5.5% GDP growth objective for 2022. Let's dive into it, because, well, there's a lot to say, and we will see why a guy named Ponzi is at the root of this mess. Hi, Jared here, and today let's talk about China. So first I'm gonna talk about the fast rise of China, and then I'm gonna explain why its growth is slowing, because of its zero-COVID policy, its stagnating housing market, and its persisting inequality. And first, let's talk about China's economy becoming a juggernaut. Yes, a juggernaut. China has been one of the world's fastest growing economies since opening up to foreign trade and investment and implementing free market reforms in 1979. Through 2018, real annual gross domestic product, or GDP, growth averaged 9.5%, which the World Bank referred to as the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history. As a result of this prosperity, China has been able to not double, not triple, but quadruple its GDP on average every 8 years, and raise an estimated 800 million people out of poverty, which is like 1/10 of the world's. It is a lot of people, and China is now one of the US main trading partners as a result of this. But every story has an end, and real GDP growth in China has drastically reduced over time, falling from 14.2% in 2007 to 6.6% in 2018. The Chinese government has accepted slower economic development, referring to it as the new normal, and acknowledged the need for China to adopt a new growth model that depends more on private consumption, services, and innovation to spur economic growth rather than fixed investment and exportation. These changes are necessary, if not essential, for China to avoid falling into the middle income trap, which occurs when nations reach a given economic level but then see their rates of economic development dramatically decline because they are unable to adopt new sources of economic growth, like innovation, for instance. And innovation is the foundation of economic growth around the world, basically. And now China is facing huge threats and issues that are dramatically slowing its growth. Let's talk about them now. And first, let's talk about its zero-COVID policy. The economy slowdown, which began in March as authorities in dozens of cities imposed lockdowns to control COVID outbreaks, has spilled over to major economies such as Germany and South Korea, as China's demand for manufactured goods slumps. And today, the Chinese government has rolled out widespread stimulus and vowed to maintain its strict zero-COVID policy, which requires for authorities to close down businesses and lock down the population when huge outbreaks occur, as it is the case now on the tourist islands of Hainan. As a result, experts are reducing the GDP projection for the remainder of the year below 4%, which is not good compared to our 14.2%. See the difference? We have now to talk about its housing market, and it is highly correlated to the dominoes effect, which is not good either. To understand the current situation of the housing market in China, we first have to understand what a Ponzi scheme is. The Ponzi scam brings in new investors by promising them a high return with little to no risk, which creates returns for previous investors. But in the end, everything basically is collapsing. Or in other words, the basic idea here is to pay the initial backers with money from future investors. Companies that run Ponzi schemes will concentrate all of their efforts on finding new investors because, well, without them, the scheme will basically run out of money. The current situation in China is probably the most challenging since the 2008 financial crisis. This is due to the fact that the property collapsed and the zero-COVID policy, two of the main challenges today, would each be a significant enough shock to induce a recession for the Chinese economy. And this is not over. These two extremely disruptive shocks are currently occurring simultaneously. Such demands and high prices led developers pre-selling homes that were not even built. They would then use that money to start new projects, creating a Ponzi-like cycle, which technically could never end. As developers starting defaulting on payments, the real estate crisis spread to banks loaning out money for projects. For instance, Evergrande has used cheap loans to significantly grow its real estate empire over the past 20 years. The corporation reported $356 billion in assets and $108 billion in annual sales. Its portfolio is massive. Evergrande has various businesses in unrelated industries, owns over 1,300 real estate projects spread across 280 Chinese cities, has a property services management, are managing nearly 2,800 projects throughout over 310 Chinese cities. Hold on, I have enough air, and directly employs over 200,000 people. Which brings us to only one word which splits the entire world: inequality. President Xi Jinping started a campaign last summer under the slogan Common Prosperity, a national policy to help the poor and control in strong industries, the expanding high-tech industries in particular. More than just a catchphrase, Common Prosperity guided the Communist Party's goals for 2022 and beyond, and for a while, Xi repeated those two words in most of his significant talks. But as always, after a year, the Common Prosperity has lost its effect, and evidence from the ground and data suggests that income inequality in China is just getting worse. Economic inequality can be measured in many ways. A common approach is the so-called Gini coefficient. It measures the income distribution of a country, with 0 representing equality and 1 representing the worst possible grade, which is not good either. China's latest official data is for 2020, with the country's Gini coefficient of 0.47, considered to be a highly unequal economy. But experts say China's official data underestimate the problem. Using additional survey data, an economist from Cornell University and Peking University released another of his Gini estimates for 2018. In this estimate, China's level of inequality was slightly higher at 0.52. By comparison, in the US, where inequality is a major policy issue, this figure is slightly better than China at 0.51. And for now, prosperity feels increasingly out of reach for millions of people in China. We've talked about lots of threats, lots of issues, lots of data for 2020, 2018, 2027, the GDP growth, the Gini coefficients, which are not always easy to understand. But the most important component, I think, to me, is the fact that China is significantly slowing. We can just only wait and see what will happen. And thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one.